Hello everybody, this is Nekrai here, and I'm coming with a mid lane guide over Season 8, Patch 8.9. Now a little background about myself before we get into it is I've been playing League of Legends since Preseason 3. I have thousands of games in the mid lane, have played every mid laner extensively, and I feel that I can share a bit of my experience and knowledge with everyone. While I may not be high elo by all means, being mid gold, and likely cannot execute everything that I say here myself properly, which is why I am in that elo, I do believe that my knowledge and experience, however, can still be helpful to both mid lane mains and new players in general. Now, there will be many things in this guide as well that, as an experienced player, you will think is self-explanatory or already knew, but it's also here to focus on helping new players and new players to mid lane. So keep that in mind as well. This is my first guide of anything like this, so if anything's wrong or could use improvement, please feel free to say so in the comments below or tell me about it, because I will be looking to make improvements for future guides as we go. Alright, without further ado though, let's get into it. So what makes a mid laner? Some of the attributes a mid laner should have is a reliable source of wave clear, a constant source of damage and kill pressure, utility or other zoning abilities or AoE, poke, and a good source of CC. So what is a mid laner's goal? Well, you will use the tools that you have, or that a mid lane champion usually tends to have, as listed before, to impact the game. You would use the wave clear ability and tools that you have to constantly relieve sieges off of your objectives and your team, and to put pressure on the enemy and their objectives or their team. You should be using your poke to weaken enemies and apply pressure before fights, or to secure objectives with less resistance. For example, if you have poked down the enemy team constantly with your Xerath, they will be less likely and less capable of resisting you from taking that dragon or the outer turret. Another thing is to use their CC, utility, and AoE to make as big of an impact in teamfights as possible, picks, or even engages at times. So an example of this would be an Orianna ult. Hitting many of the enemy team with your Orianna ult could have a huge impact with that utility, CC, and AoE, and could even win you fights that you would normally lose otherwise. Or another example would be an Ahri charm, which could get you picks on enemy champions or carries, and even engage team fights at times, depending on how the team reacts to it. Another goal for a mid laner is to use the kill pressure to make picks on enemies, or do as much damage as possible in team fights before or without dying. So, for example, a Karthus would try to do as much damage as possible, and then when he does die, do as much damage as possible before he can't anymore. That is your goal as a mid laner. Combining all these tools to make an impact across the map and the jungle should be your main goal as a mid laner. Mid lane is in a position that can have some of the most impact on the map, if not the most, contested with jungle of course, to impact other lanes or even the jungle itself. So keep that in mind. Of course, the qualifications and ability to do all the things listed above is very dependent on the champion. For example, a Xerath would be much better at poking the enemy team and pressuring that way than, say, a Zed would be. However, a Zed would be much better at making picks and kill pressure than, say, a Xerath would be. So keep that in mind as well. So this should be pretty self-explanatory to players that have played the game for a while, but as a new mid laner or a new player, I'm going to go ahead and explain it. The safest start that you can start with is a Doran's Ring and 2 potions. The reason for that being is Doran's Ring gives you more health and a constant mana regen, which allows you to stay in lane longer. This helps you in the sense of if you make mistakes or missteps, the Doran's Ring extra health provided can sometimes help you make the difference between living or dying or being forced out of the lane or not. It may not seem like much, but trust me, every little bit helps. The second start possible is Dark Seal and Refillable Potion. Now, Dark Seal does not provide the constant mana regen, which means you could run into mana issues in the lane if you start this. It also doesn't provide you with the health. However, it does go into a item later into the game, which is very situational and you wouldn't get unless you're snowballing incredibly hard. The upsides to a Dark Seal is it sells for a lot more than a Doran's Ring does, and it is cheaper, allowing you to get a refillable potion. Now, why is refillable potion better than health potions? Well, refillable potions 150 for 2 charges, which 2 charges would normally cost 100 gold if it was health potions. That may sound like you're getting ripped off, but considering the fact that every time you back, you get 2 more fills, it could quickly add up in the sense that you won't have to buy potions anymore, which means over time, you can easily save, depending on how much you back or how long you keep it, several hundred gold in potions, which could be used later on to go into other items instead. Corruption Potion is also a start for some mid laners. Doesn't work for all of them, but say, example, Kassadin or Aurelion Sol. It's generally just a situational to your champion start, so I wouldn't go Corruption Potion on every mid laner you go. Longsword and Refillable Potion is obviously a AD start for AD assassins such as Talon or Zed. Again, you go Refillable Potion over 3 health potions, which a lot of lower elo AD mid laners make the mistake of doing, because as an AD mid laner, you're melee usually, which means you get poked out of the lane, which means you're going to need a lot more health potions than you normally would as a, say, a ranged mid laner, which can definitely add up over time to help you get to your items to snowball as quickly as possible, which should be your goal as an AD assassin mid laner. Of course, there are some unique starts as well, such as Katarina, who sometimes starts boots in 4 health potions. So, I won't go into every detail because there's too many for me to think of off the top of my head, but keep in mind that your start is dependent on your champion, but the most basic, safest start would be to go Doran's Ring 2 health potions. So let's get into itemization. Rabadon's Death Cap is a standard item on almost all AP mid laners. It gives stats that helps any mid laner or any AP mid laner, and generally you will want to get this every game, of course with some exceptions to a few champions, but in general you would want to get this. Now, you wouldn't want to rush it first item, but third, fourth, sometimes in some cases second item, it's not a bad idea. Void Staff is another standard AP item on most AP mid laners, due to the fact that it gives Magic Pen. Now, if the team starts to build any MR at all, Void Staff actually does more damage than Rabadon's Death Cap. It may not seem like it because it gives probably in total, after the Rabadon's passive is accounted for, 120 less AP, but that 40% Magic Pen actually does more damage than the flat AP that you get from Rabadon's once a team builds an MR item, or a champion builds an MR item. So keep that in mind as well. So Void Staff and Rabadon's is a pair of items that you will generally get on every mid laner, or every AP mid laner that you play. Luden's Echo is a strong item here recently, and it gotten buffed this last patch, making it even a stronger item. It's good in general on poke and burst AP mid laners, so champions like Xerath or Brand get a lot of use out of Luden's Echo. So if you're playing one of those champions, and many other champions here recently as well, go Luden's Echo as a first item. It is a strong item, and generally it just gives you extra burst damage on top of your already strong damage. Rylai's is a item good on poke, damage over time, or kite AP mid laners. Now, what do I mean by damage over time or kite AP mid laners? Damage over time mid laners such as Brand, Cassiopeia, or Malzahar that have spells that they rely on heavily that does damage over time, such as the Brand Burn or the Cassiopeia Poison or the Malzahar Infliction. Each proc of that damage over time applies Rylai's Slow, so that's why it's good on them. Now, a kite AP mid laner, that could be one like, say, Victor, who does really well at going in and going out and going back in and going back out. Or say a champion like Vel'Koz that uses their massive AoE and runs around just kiting out, throwing spells. Those are champions that really do well with Rylai's. Liandry's, after the recent changes, it does more damage towards tanks. So it's good on some poke champions, not all of them. It's good on damage over time champions because it works the same way as Rylai's, where every proc of the damage on, say, a poison or a burn procs Liandry's again. Or against a heavy tank team. That is when you'd want to buy Liandry's. Say their team has 3 or 4 tanks or so, then Liandry's would be a very good item because you would do a lot more damage because it's dependent on their maximum health. Rod of Ages is used on mana hungry or late game scaling AP champions such as Kassadin or Karthus, champions that use quite a bit of mana and scale very well. Tear is also a item that you get on a mana hungry and heavy spam champion such as Karthus and in some cases Kassadin or Veigar even. Nashor's Tooth is good on auto attack reliant AP champions like Azir or Diana, champions that need to auto attack or use a lot of auto attacks in their kit. So to proc Diana passive or Azir's Sand Soldiers. Lichbane, however, is good on mid laners with an auto attack reliant spell such as Echo's E, Fizz's W, or Victor's Q. Now keep in mind the difference between the two. Lichbane is used on generally on champions that have an auto attack reliant spell. For example, to trigger Fizz's W, you use it and you auto attack with it. So that procs the Lichbane. However, they are not constantly auto attacking. You would not be constantly auto attacking with Fizz or constantly auto attacking with Victor, so you wouldn't want a Nashor's Tooth because it's a one-time spell use burst type of item. So keep that in mind, don't confuse the two. Zhonya's is an effective item on almost every mid laner or every AP mid laner and is definitely a core item that you need to have against an AD team, against an assassin laner, or in high burst damage opponents. So a Zhonya's can save your life against, say, a Zed, not only because of the armor, but because of the way his ult works and his burst damage, or even a Fizz. Even though Fizz is AP, Zhonya's Hourglass can negate his ult and most of his burst damage, which in turn could save your life and makes the job of an assassin so much harder. So keep that in mind that that Zhonya's Hourglass is not just limited to against AD opponents. It is good in almost every situation to where there is a high burst damage opponent on the enemy team and you need to avoid dying. It is also a good zoning tool in team fights even if you're ahead because the enemies worry about when you come out of Zhonya's. So I recommend getting a Zhonya's on generally most of the matches that you play. Of course, they're all very situational, but trust me, it's a very helpful item and can prevent many deaths and gets you many kills. Mironomican is used against teams with crucial healing spells, such as a Swain ult, or a Volibear passive, or a Mundo ult. Generally, you'd only want to get this item if you're playing against something like that. So, if you see that Mundo on the enemy team, or the Mundo and the Swain, you probably want to try to get this item as quickly as you can. Not as quickly as you can, but say second item. Every champion has a core item set. Usually it is 1 or 2 items, and then the rest are situational based on the game. So keep that in mind when you're playing your champion. For example, Biz almost has to have a Lich Bane, or Victor almost has to have a Lich Bane to properly utilize their kit and as much as possible. The rest afterwards, though, can be pretty situational depending on the game, and you can change them around as you go. And as a matter of fact, I encourage you to change them around as you go every game, because building the same exact thing every single game does not utilize your champion to the most potential it has, and at times can even cost you the game. So keep that in mind as well. Banshee's Veil is used against heavy AP teams, or to counter devastating spells such as a Karthus ult, or in some cases AP assassins such as LeBlanc. It can help you survive champions like LeBlanc, who rely on one crucial spell to use the rest of their kit properly and burst you down. Or Karthus, whenever you're randomly walking through the jungle and you get ulted because ulting somebody else and it chunks you for half health. If you had a Banshee's Veil, that wouldn't have happened. Proto Belt is used by AP assassins generally with gap closers, such as Fizz or Echo. The melee assassins that dash into you and get close enough that they can proc Proto Belt and get as much damage off as possible. So it's generally an item that you'd only want to get on those certain mid laners. Hextech Gunblade is used by unique burst champions such as Katarina or LeBlanc. You in general wouldn't get this on many other mid laners, but they work surprisingly well in Katarina or LeBlanc. Magi's Soul Stealer is an item that is usually bought when going on large killing sprees or you're really ahead. However, with a disclaimer, it is a very risky buy because the power of the item depends on your ability to get kills. It's just not a reliable source of anything, and it can easily turn out to be a waste of money if you start getting a kill or two and then don't do as well into the future of the game. So I wouldn't recommend buying it. Spellbinder is uniquely bought in a few champions to increase burst, but in my experience and opinion of playing, I have not actually even bought the item, just due to the fact that it does not seem to have a priority on many mid lane champions, and there's many other items to buy that are much more crucial and important than Spellbinder. However, there are a few champions that do buy it, such as Vladimir, so keep in mind the champion that you're playing, what they are good with. Advice for that is to go on champion.gg or pro builds and look up consistent builds that you see, and that can give you a general idea. Now, a disclaimer with that is don't follow the builds exactly, because every build, every game is different, which means every build needs to be different. Otherwise, you're not going to be utilizing things to your maximum potential. So, if you want to look, there's no problem looking at those builds, but keep in mind that every game is different, and use it as a reference, more of a reference instead of a direct I have to buy this mentality. Boots are very are flexible within the game. Sorcery Shoes is the common because it gives magic pin. However, some people or some champions, both really, people prefer Ionian Boots for the cooldown reduction, or some champions need it into their build. But in most cases, for most mid laners, you get the 40% CDR off of the build that you go. Some cases you don't. If you really need that 10%, go ahead. But commonly, Sorcery Shoes goes over Ionian. Merc Treads is good against heavy AP teams or teams with a really hard CC, such as a Morgana Snare.
that can sometimes save you as well because it reduces the duration of the CC. Ninja Tabbies is good against heavy AD teams and is really good if you're playing against, say, a Zed. So keep those two in mind. There's nothing wrong with going defensive boots on an AP mid laner. Excuse me. Now, your early game goals. This depends on your champion's power spike and playstyle, but these are general for mid lane. Farm as efficiently as possible and try to deny your opponent CS or force them to back. This is your general goal in lane, is to farm as best as possible and deny the opponent farm. Getting vision in the enemy jungle or river to protect yourself and team from ganks. This is important in the early game because generally a jungle tries to go for a gank after he clears his second buff, or some junglers try to cheese after killing their first buff. So getting vision in the enemy jungle can not only save yourself, but save your team from ganks. And saving your team or yourself from ganks can sometimes make a difference between making and breaking a lane. So taking an extra 20 seconds in between pushing your first wave out and putting a ward, say, on Wraith Camp or in the river is not going to hurt you. It could very well save your life or your teammate's life. Roaming to get picks on low health enemy junglers, gank over pushed enemies, or save teammates in skirmishes. Now, if you warded into the enemy jungler, sometimes you will find the enemy jungler in their jungle clearing out camps, but being incredibly low. Which means in some situations you can actually get a free kill on the enemy jungle and put them behind by doing this. Now, of course, it's risky to do by yourself because if your laner collapses on you and you can't get out, but sometimes your jungler will help you as well and walk in there with you and help you invade them. So it can be a source of free kills on weakened opponents, and if it's not, your vision could have saved your teammate's life. Ganking over pushed enemies, such as, say, the enemy bot lane is pushed all the way into your tower, can sometimes get you free kills and get you ahead, or it can even get your other lanes ahead and allow them to snowball themselves, which can help you drastically over in the future. Another thing is you need to save your teammates in skirmishes, which means when the enemies are, say your team and the enemies are fighting 3v3 at Dragon Pit. It's your jungle, your bot lane, and their jungle and their bot lane. If you came, that would make it a 4v3. If your mid laner came, it would be a 4v4. But if you didn't come and your lane did, it would be a 3v4. Which, in any of those situations, if your team dies, that could be 3 or 4 kills over to their team, which can make or break an early game or even allow them to snowball into the future. However, with your help there, you could turn that into a winning situation. And if you weren't there and your team lost the fight and gave up 3 kills, then imagine thinking to yourself of knowing that you could have possibly stopped that and turned that around and changed the game. And if you didn't come help and the enemy mid laner came and helped, then you definitely would be at fault, and I assure you your teammates would be screaming at you too. So giving up that wave of CS, it can be worth it to stop your team possibly from losing heavily in the early game in skirmishes. This also applies to your jungler as well. Say your jungler gets invaded, or your jungler invades them and is in a difficult fight, and your mid laner reacts and you don't, then you're going to be partially at fault for the reason that he died. And if you would have came and helped, you could have easily turned that around and made it a winning situation for your team. So track the enemy jungler, push your lane, trade, or attempt kills when the jungler is on the map either by a ward or ganking other lanes. I can't stress it enough. I've seen many times it happen. It's happened to me too. Don't try to attempt kills when the enemy jungler isn't on a ward somewhere or ganking another lane on the map, because it is a very good chance that even if you win it and you're barely alive, they're gonna come running through that bush and kill you, and then it was basically for nothing. So be careful and keep knowledge of where the enemy jungler is before you try to kill.
Try to back, if possible, with more gold through either CS or kills than your opponent to set up a lead for future lane dominance through an item advantage. If you have a 10 CS lead or a 15 CS lead and you force the enemy back and you back at the same time, you're ahead, because that amount of gold could make a difference between you buying one smaller item over them, which may not sound like a lot, but imagine if you got an amplifying tome over what they got. That's 15-20 AP extra than they have, which could make a difference between you killing them and you not killing them. It may seem like something small, but any advantage you can get can make a difference between making or breaking your lane. So keep that in mind as well. Keep that in mind when you're picking a fight with the enemy as well. If they have more items than you, be aware that you have a better chance of dying if they have more items than you, even if it's little. So in lane, at 5 minutes, the maximum CS possible is 38. At 10 minutes, the goal is 100. However, if you can manage 80 CS by 10 minutes, you're still pretty solid, because even challengers can struggle to get 100 by 10, and it's unreasonable to imagine that you're going to get the maximum amount of CS possible by the maximum amount of time, because there's several factors. You roaming, the enemy harassing you, getting ganked, just purely missing the CS. It's just unreasonable to imagine that you're going to get perfect CS, because the enemy laner is going to be trying to deny you CS as well. And believe it or not, it's going to somewhat succeed often. So keep that in mind. From there on out, the goal is 100 CS per 10 minutes, meaning at 20 minutes you should aim for 200 CS. These are rough goals. 38 is the maximum possible at 5 minutes, so try to aim for maybe 34, 35. You want to get as close as to the max as possible, but don't beat yourself up if you don't, because it's completely unreasonable to imagine that you will. Just trust me. On average, 15 to 16 CS equals 1 kill, which means if you have 16 CS over your opponent, it's almost like you killed them. So keep that in mind when you're backing or picking a fight with somebody after just backing, that technically you're ahead. It's almost like you killed him. A 1-0 Zed with 40 CS is actually behind in gold to a 0-0-70 CS Victor. Meaning technically that Victor is ahead of the Zed, even though that Zed has 1 kill. If you can manage to kill and CS efficiently, you will be far more fed than if you have 10 kills and almost no CS. I've seen tons of people, including myself even at earlier stages of the game, say, I don't need the CS, I have 10 kills, I'm farming my gold off kills. Imagine if you had those 10 kills and you had a good amount of CS. Imagine how much stronger you would be. There's no reason not to CS when it's there for you and get the kills if you have them or have the ability to. Farming is a consistent form of gold. It's much more reliable for you to CS and to get your gold than it is to get income from kills. Kills are not reliable. Kills go down in value the more they die. You can't consistently rely on being able to kill people every single game or constantly throughout that game. So when you get kills, yes, it's nice. If you can get more and more of them, yes, go do it. But it's much more reliable to maintain CS while you're killing people, or to prioritize CS over attempting to get kills. There's no reason for you to miss 15 to 20 CS all because you wanted to throw a few extra Qs at the enemy laner. CS can help you come back from being behind, help you stay caught up if you lost lane, or keep up with an enemy that is fed but not CSing properly. For example, like I said earlier, if you have 100 CS
but the enemy laner top lane is 3-0 but only has 40 CS, you're going to be you're going to be equally strong, if not stronger than that person. So while you're in your head, you may be like, oh my god, they're 3-0, they're feeding, we're going to lose, or your team says that. Keep in mind that CS lead that you have means that you're just as strong as they are, which means that you can win the game because you can contest that person. Wave manipulation is a core skill for playing mid lane and even in other lanes. Your ability to manipulate leads can push your lead even farther or prevent an enemy snowball. Freezing is when the minion wave is not pushing towards you nor your opponent, it means it's staying in the same place. Freezing can be used to push your advantage harder, deny the enemy CS, or grant yourself CS if you're far behind and at risk of dying to your laner. So, how do you freeze? Well, freezing is possible by matching your enemy laner's damage on the minion wave. If they auto, you auto. So forth, so forth. Safer freezes near your tower require more skill, but they require your enemy laner to push towards you, meaning that they're more susceptible to ganks and so forth and messing up. So safer freezes towards your tower are beneficial for you if you're behind and can allow you to farm safely with less risk of getting ganked or less risk of being ult in by the enemy laner. So you want to freeze near your tower, then what you have to do is match the enemy's damage and prevent them from pushing into you. The closer it is to your tower, the faster your minions are going to get there and reinforce your wave, which means within a wave or two, your minion wave is actually going to push into their tower. However, if you can keep 3 minions when you're close to tower, or 1 when you're a little farther away from tower, depends on how close you are to your side of the map, then the minion wave will balance itself. So say you're closer to your tower, but you're not in your tower range, because you don't want to be in your tower range for a freeze. You're closer to your tower range, you want 3 extra minions to be alive on the enemy wave by the time your wave gets there. Now why is that? That will delay your wave from pushing into farther into their territory, which means that while it takes 10 extra seconds for the enemy minion wave to get to you, those 3 minions can slow down the time that your minions take to push to allow the enemy's minions to reinforce, which in turn will balance out the wave and allow you to freeze in front of your tower. This is assuming that the enemy is going to be doing damage to the minion wave and trying to push into you. So keep this in mind as well. If my explanation isn't exactly clear or you need a visual example, there are many guides and many good guides of how to freeze and how to successfully freeze in front of your tower. So I apologize if my explanation isn't the most clear on this. So another form of wave manipulation is denying XP and CS. When you push the enemy when they're not, you want to push the enemy when they're not in lane as much as possible to make them miss XP and CS. The reason why this is if you push your wave into their tower, the tower will kill it much quickly than their minion wave, which means they're missing CS quicker and XP quicker. So in reality, it may put yourself in a bad position in the lane, but it makes them miss much more CS and XP, which can give you an advantage. So how to push into them is basically do more damage to the wave than your enemy can and try to force them under tower. Forcing them under tower will make CSing much more difficult for them, of course depending on their champion, because they're going to have to be trying to CS under tower. And a lot of lower elos don't know how to CS under tower. So this can widen your CS lead drastically over your opponent. Pushing hard can make the wave bounce back to you and set up a future freeze for yourself, because this forces the by forcing your wave into the tower will kill your minions, and their minion wave will get there sooner, meaning that they will have usually more minions than you do. So, in turn, if you don't touch the wave and you only last it, the minion wave should push into you, and then you can set up your freeze. Pushing hard can also break an enemy freeze. So if the enemy is freezing the wave and you damage their minions more than they can damage yours, it's going to push into their tower, and there will be two things that will happen. Either it will push into their tower and it will break their freeze, or they will stand there and take the minion aggro, which will allow them to take more damage but keep the minion wave in place, which in turn can mean that you have more kill pressure over them and can even give you the opportunity to all in later. Always push the enemy wave, always push into the enemy tower before going back or for a roam. This will limit the amount of CS you lose, and preoccupy the enemy laner with clearing the wave or choosing to miss XP and CS to react to you. Say you're going for a roam and you push into the enemy tower. The enemy laner has two choices now, and they're not very good ones. It will either be stay mid lane, clear the CS so that way they get the CS and XP, but allow you to roam with no contest from them, or delayed contest from them. Or roam to follow you to try and stop you, and miss CS and XP, which means that they may have stopped you from your roam, but they just may have missed out on a level or 50 or 60 gold, which can in turn add up to giving you level advantages or gold advantage. Wave manipulation is a tool that can be used both offensively and defensively, and sometimes it can lead to the ability to get leads that you normally wouldn't. Which means basically you can get yourself fed and a lead over your opponent only by being superior at them than wave manipulating than they are. So at times you can get CS leads, XP leads, meaning levels, or even get kill pressure on the enemy laner because of your wave manipulation tactics. For example, if you're ahead and you're freezing at your tower, the enemy laner has to push up into your zone of control to get CS. So he gets two options. He pushes into you, towards you, meaning you have more room to try and kill them, or they can get ganked, or they can sit by their tower or attempt to roam and miss even more CS and XP because they can't do anything to stop you. It puts your enemy in a bad position and can single-handedly get you the lead over people if you can do it properly. By no means am I good at an expert at it, but trust me, you can. I pulled it off at times. It's more effective the lower elo you are. So you need to know how to do it yourself and counteract it to go into the higher elos because it becomes much more common. In terms of defensiveness, it can be decided between you feeding and losing matchups, preventing ganks on yourself, or increasing the odds of ganks on the enemy, minimizing the damage caused by a superior lane opponent on your gold income. It can be the determining factor between you going 0-5 or you going 0-2 but still having farm. Meaning you, by using wave manipulation properly and freezing, it can make a difference between you being useless and relevant in your game. This also is important in the case of enemy laners backing at bad times, meaning backing without pushing into you, roaming, or otherwise leaving lane. So doing this can, manipulating wave properly can maximize the potential of the amount of gold and XP they miss in cases of mistakes that they make. This also makes it where if they failed a roam, they lost out entirely. Say they didn't push into you, where you pushed into them and they roamed and they failed. Not only did they fail their roam, but they just lost a whole minion wave mid lane. That adds up very quickly and can literally turn a lane around. It also provides a situation for you to roam with minimal losses in the case that you manipulate the wave properly. So, in all short, wave manipulation can decide and make and break lanes, and it should not be underestimated by all means. Now here is a map with my terrible drawing of different places to ward in pink ward. The circles are pink ward locations. The X's are normal trinket ward locations, and the yellow are just neutral places that you can throw down pink wards or wards on either side. Now, if you're on blue side and you're playing on blue side, an offensive pink ward to put down, which is very good because the enemy jungler tends to not run through these bushes and it can see crucial information about them, is right here in front of red buff or right here behind wolves. The reason why these are good is a pink ward can see the enemy jungler in red if you have it right here on this red bush, clearing red, running to golems, or running to wraiths, which means that you could see if you're going to get ganked from possibly top side or save your top laner from being ganked. It also gives you opportunities of invasions or killing the enemy jungler running around through here because you know where he will be. Right here is a good spot because you can see their entrance into wolves, and you can see if they pass by through here to get into river, which can be good to save your bot lane from ganks or to save yourself from being ganked from bot side. On the red side, you just flip it the opposite. You put them in the opposite side of where you would on the blue. Here on the lane brushes on the sides are good for denying vision and allowing your jungler to know, hey, I can gank in this bush because there's a pink ward there, so it can't be warded. However, it'll likely get cleared out fast, but there are some situations to where even the enemy laner will try to clear it out, and you can try to fight them for it, and sometimes get yourself kills. That's why if you're on red side, you want to put it towards your base on the brush. And if you're on blue side, you want to put it on towards your base in the brush, because that means the enemy laner has to, or the jungler has to be on your side of the river and your side of the lane to clear out that pink ward, giving you easier time and them to be in a worse position to react in case of a fight. Now say you're on red side, right here behind red buff or right here behind blue buff are good warding spots for defensive wards to help see if, say, the jungler keeps invading because they have a Shaco or a Lee Sin or a Kha'Zix. This can help you prevent your jungler from dying to invades, or even save yourself from ganks from junglers that like to gank from behind, like Hecarim or Lee Sin. These island brushes are also good for getting vision with your pink wards, but they generally get cleared out incredibly fast because everyone runs through them and everyone expects it there. And then of course the Dragon and Baron Pit. These are decent spots. You want to put them behind the wall there because it can't be seen from the outside. You have to go into the pit to see it usually. Means it won't get cleared out as fast. Alright, so your mid-game goals. You want to roam to other lanes and try to push your advantage, get your teammates leads, or even grab yourself kills if you're from behind. Roaming is a great source of getting yourself kills and leads if you're behind the opponent or you can't beat your opponent in lane. So keep that in mind, or it can also help you get your teammates leads if they're starting to lose or they're just neutral in lane. You could be the deciding snowball factor for your teammates. Use the strengths of your champion, which vary, to impact across the map, such as roaming and making picks as an assassin, or roaming, pushing, and zoning with your control and your utility or your AoE, or poking down with a poke mage, or shoving down towers. So use the tools and resources that your mid lane champion that you have to play and play around those. Obviously, if you're playing Xerath, you're not going to want to be invading the enemy jungle and looking for picks. That's generally not what you want to do, because if you get in a bad situation, you're immobile, you're squishy, you need range, you're gonna die. However, if you're playing Zed or something, you're much more capable of making picks in the jungle and getting out, or just snowballing your lead even harder. Same goes the other way around. You don't want to be trying to poke people down as Zed or something of that sort. Group with your team and try to gain a lead behind, or push your lead to force objectives and use your lead to get priority over them. So say you're behind, grouping up with your team can get you kills that you normally wouldn't get and help make up for being behind, or even catch you back up in the game. Or if you're ahead and you group with your team, you can use your lead to force objectives and get priority on them, meaning that the enemy is going to be much less inclined to try and contest you on that dragon if you're 4-0 with near perfect CS, because they're going to be getting into a fight with you, the bad person on the team, and your team. So in most cases, they might just give it up or jump into their deaths and suicide for it, meaning you get more of a lead. Either way it goes. Securing vision on the enemy jungle, on objectives, or defensive wards in your jungle. That should be your goal throughout the entire game, early game, mid game, and late game. It is to get wards so that way you know the enemy movements, which will allow yourself to get picks, allow yourself to take objectives, or make rotations that you normally wouldn't make with little contest. Of course, continued CS is important to maintain a flow of gold and keep your lead. Many Lolos forget that past laning phase, you still need to farm. And if you don't farm, you're going to end up losing your lead or throwing entirely, because as I've said previously, kills are not a reliable source of income, so you still need income somehow, which means farming is important no matter what stage you are in the game. So keep that in mind as well. Late game, not dying without a good cause or trade. Meaning, say you're 5-0 on Victor, and you just traded yourself for the 0-5 Orianna. So imagine that whenever you're going in for that kill and trading your life for it. Doing as much damage as possible in team fights or landing good and high impact CCs, such as a 4-man Orianna or things like that. That is your goal in a team fight in late game. Properly and safely zoning Dragon or Baron. Most people, and most of your teammates will yell at you for this probably too. Just because you're on Dragon or Baron doesn't mean you should be the one attacking it. Because a mid laner does not do nearly as much damage to a Dragon or Baron as say your ADC or the jungler. But what you do have is zoning capability. Because in general, a mid laner's kit comes with a lot of utility, or some utility, some CC, and quite a bit of damage. Meaning that someone trying to go in to contest has to either go through you or not at all. Meaning that you can get free damage on the enemy because they're focused on Dragon or Baron, or just deny them entirely from getting to it because of your kit. Meaning that your job as a mid laner needs to be to zone people off Dragon or Baron, not being the one killing Dragon or Baron. Of course, this depends on some situations, but in general, you want to be the one zoning. Making picks on outposition enemies that are alone or overextended. Say you see 4 of them top lane, but that ADC is by herself pushing into your second inner turret. that's basically a free kill for you. And that should be priorities whenever you're playing. Because there's two opportunities for you when that happens. You can force a 5v4 fight top lane, and you have an advantage, or you can go make a pick on that free kill bot lane too. Either way, you're in a favorable trade. Which means that situations like that can cause a fight that will win you the game. This also goes on the opposite. Don't be the one that's overextended by yourself, or don't be the one that's alone with nobody on the map that you can see, or don't be the one out of position, because your death can lose you the game too. Of course, constantly CSing, that's something you should be doing in the late game. Grouping and sticking with your team. Again, this ties into making picks on enemies that are alone. If you're not with your team, they can get caught out and die because you're not there, or you can get caught out and die. Treat every death in the late game like it will lose you the game, because it can, and sometimes, often enough, it will lose you the game. So, think about that next time you die for that canyon minion. Alright, things to think about overall in the game. As a mid laner, think of yourself as a second jungler at times. Work not only to get yourself a lead, but your team too. It's a lot easier to 5v5 than it is to 1v9. Because if you got 20 kills, and 19 of those kills are on you, what happens when you die? Your team's going to be throwing paper airplanes at the enemy because you're dead. And even if you have 19 kills, you can't 1v5 in most situations. Almost 99% of situations you will not 1v5. So share your gold, share your lead, get your teammates leads too. And that means instead of one threat target that they have on your team, everyone on your team's a threat, which makes winning the game so much easier. Try to call your Mias as much as possible. Deny your enemy roams, or make them miss a lot of CS XP for roaming. Pinging your Mia is important. Not only because if your team does react, which sometimes they won't because it's solo queue, but at least you tried. But if they do react, you could have just saved their life, which means you could have just stopped the enemy mid laner from getting a lead on you, or you could have stopped another lane from getting a lead on your other laners. Just by throwing a ping. You can also follow your enemy and try to deny it that way, or make them miss a lot of CS and XP for roaming. It's always possible to make up CS, XP, or worst case scenario, a tower. But it's not always possible to make up for the deaths that your team got that could have been prevented by your roam or help. Is that 6 minions in your lane really worth giving up 3 kills at Dragon Pit, all because you weren't there to help? You can make up that CS, but you can't exactly make up all the deaths that your team just got there. So think about that whenever you're like deciding not to help or not reacting. So pay attention. Don't force things you can't win, or try to force kills. CS leads are just as good as kills. Like I said many times before, don't try so hard to kill your opponent that you miss CS or get yourself killed for it. It's just not worth it. Your build, game plan, capabilities, and strategy is completely unique to each game you play. Some matchup champions or elite situations will determine what you can and can't do. You don't want to go invading the enemy jungle when it's a Shaco or a Kha'Zix. That's basically asking yourself to die. You don't want to have to... Trying to roam is difficult whenever you're going up against a Twisted Fate or Taliyah, because they can just follow you. So think about things like that. Your lack of reaction or awareness can not only destroy your lane, but your other teammates' lanes as well. So it's important to keep aware of your lane opponent and the things that are happening around you. Because mid is the most versatile and almost one of the most reactionary, if not the most reactionary, probably tied with jungle in the entire game. So that's a very important skill to have when playing mid lane. Alright, so I think this just about sums up my guide here. There's many things in here that are probably self-explanatory or repetitive. Some things that maybe as an experienced mid laner you learn, or as a new mid laner you learn. Either way it goes, I hope my guide helped you, and I hope to make future guides as we go along. If there's anything in here that you see that is wrong, you don't agree with, or you have questions over, please feel free to discuss it with me in the comment section, and I will try to get back to you and give my reasoning for it, or maybe I'll just learn something new in general. So I would appreciate any criticism or advice that you have to give me, or any debate that you'd like to have over this. I hope you guys all have a nice day, and good luck climbing the solo queue ladders.